Okay, good morning, folks. This is Founder Laerun, and I'm with Fantasy Grounds College. I've got an exciting little preview here. Candlekeep Mysteries is now out on the Fantasy Grounds store and also out in other formats all over the internet. If you go to the Fantasy Grounds store, you'll be presented with this page. I will provide this link in the description after the video, so if you guys are inclined to purchase this, if you're into DnD5e. Also, the stated price on the top is 30 bucks, but if you own everything and you actually put it in your store, when you actually go to buy it, if you put it in your shopping cart, you're going to notice your discount, and it's going to be about 25 bucks. So this is provided that you already own most, if not all, of the bundles. If you don't, then you're probably going to end up paying mostly the main price of it. Initial review on this is that it does have the Dyson logo map. So if you are looking for colored maps, I'm sorry, it does not have mostly colored maps. So, and the other thing is the artwork is nice. So if you are into just the pictures and stuff, that's really beautiful. But anyway, so I broke this thing down. So we have encounters, which build your NPCs, your items, which go into building your parcels, your images and maps, the story elements. There's some tables. And in this case, it didn't have any quest items, which I thought was kind of interesting. I'm sure there are quests, but there are no rewards for said quests, meaning that Fantasy Grounds doesn't have a way to award that. So it's probably built into the experience points that you get for the encounters, or your game master can make those up. So this section is not applicable in this setting. And then I have my notes here. We can close that. This is my link to the store, so I'll go ahead and close that now. And let's take a look. So the NPCs are basically grouped into a section called NPCs-D&D Candlekeep Mysteries. So if I stretch this out a little bit, there seems to be quite a few creatures. There's like 3 pages. Well, pages are relative to how much you stretch this window out, but nonetheless, there's 3 pages of NPCs. So that's a good sign. I like having lots of different monsters and such, so that's pretty cool. So that's that, and I'm going to bring up one of the, of these NPC stat blocks. So this is a treasure room door. So it's actually a trap. So in 5th edition in Fantasy Grounds, traps, doors, if they're animated, or any sort of NPC or vehicles are treated as a stat block. So if you have something that needs to take damage or that gives damage, normally you would put it on a stat block, even though it's not a living creature. So in this case, it has 4 hit points and its armor class is 10, and it has stats all across here, and then it has a feature on here which basically blows up in your face if you open it. So that's just a basic idea of some of the content in here. There's a warhorse skeleton, which I think is cool. A lot of these do not have colored tokens, so if you're looking for that, a lot of these are just letters and numbers. So if you have your own tokens, you can always sub those out. But again, you have to unlock it and be able to swap them out. So the other thing is it has all these encounters which go with all of the adventures. I think there's like 15 different ones in here. I watched a video last night, and it looks like there's a bunch of different things that you can go on for quests. I think there's maybe even more than 15. It looks like there's like 19 different things here. So there's a lot of quests in here, and they were all written by different authors on the DM's Guild. If you watched my show yesterday, we kind of talked about that, and we did a review on some of the content that might go with this particular setting. So it has a lot of NPCs, and then I'm sure some of those are built into these encounters. So for instance, there's a foray that you go into the Cloakwood. When you open this up, the counters are already done. Some of the tokens do have an actual token, and some of them just have a letter token. So this Immortal Lotus Monk is probably unique to the setting, whereas a Black Pudding is more common amongst D&D, at least. So this is what you'll find in the encounters. So all the encounters are done for you for each one of these chapters in the book, and it has a lot of the artwork or the information probably pinned into the story entries and also onto the maps if applicable. You have your items, which it looks like there's a lot of unique items that come with the module. It looks like there's a couple pages worth, so that's cool. I like having new magic items and new things to look at. There's like some potions and some scrolls and some keys and all kinds of cool things. So I really like that. And then those would go into your either into your parcels, which is over here, or they might be linked to a character or a story. So that's really, really nice. Let's take a look. So here's an item called the Rite of Redemption or Redamnation, and it looks like it's some sort of rite and ritual. So these are just items that appear in some of the content on the stories and in the adventures. So you have your parcels, which are already built for you. So if you open these up, they're already developed for you. They're probably attached to a story entry or some kind of quest, so that's really cool. Looks like there's a couple pages of those, which is nice. The story is broken down into chapters. So the first chapter in here is called the Book of Books. It just kind of tells you what this thing might entail. So I'm going to read this passage for the first part. So, a Book of Books. Candlekeep Mysteries is an anthology of adventures written by members of the Dungeons & Dragons community. Each adventure begins with a book that the characters find in Candlekeep, an enormous library located on the Sword Coast in the Forgotten Realms setting. So if you've never played in the Forgotten Realms, there's this huge community castle-like thing that exists right on the coast. The ocean is one side of there's a cliffside that's basically on one side of this thing. It's kind of like a Hogwarts, but it's not necessarily a magical college. It's more like a big library. There's a consolidation of works here that people would kill for to get their hands on, and I'm sure they do. A lot of the premise of this adventure series is to bring back unique items and lore and literature and books. One of the entries that you have to get into the library itself is to have a book that is basically unique and rare or special or maybe even just popular. So there's an entry fee. It says if you're not running this in a Forgotten Realms campaign, which some people don't, they use homebrew or other games, you can adapt the adventures in this book for other settings. You can substitute any large library similar to Candlekeep. Examples from other published D&D settings include the following. So on the world of Exandria, there's an academy, which would be in Taldore, so that's in Wildemount. In Eberron, there's a library. In the nation of Zalargro, there's a university also, and then there's the Morgrave University in the city of Sharn. And if you're in Greyhawk in the world of Oerth, the Great Library in the Free City of Greyhawk also exists. So this can represent any one of those great libraries, even the Great Library of Alexandria and ancient Egypt and those sort of things. So you kind of have a template as to how you might include something as important as a large repository of lore, magic, and other secrets and mysteries. So this is a really cool setup for any sort of adventure. This allows a little bit more replayability. If you notice that most modules, when you use them, they don't provide you with a lot of opportunity to replay. So that's one of the things that I really appreciate about using this type of modules, because you kind of have more of a replayability, and they're not necessarily connected, and you have different stories to go on. And if you don't like one story, you can use another. And there's quite a few in here, so it's not like you only have like a few. So there's tons of things that you can use out of here to either supplement what you're already doing, maybe some in-between adventures. And I think it would be cool if you had a bard or some kind of sage or lore master amongst your group, and one of your sessions, or maybe a handful of sessions, forces you to go or compels you to go to Candlekeep and go on a quest. So I think that would be a really cool way to validate some of the features that you get as a sage or a lore master or even a bard. Maybe you're part of a college, like the bard of the College of Knowledge or anything like that would justify or at least explain away why you would go to Candlekeep other than just getting refuge. So there's some pretty cool adventure hooks and ideas for you depending on what you're playing and what your characters are like. And then all the other classes and characters would be supportive. They would be basically there for the ride, or they'd be bodyguards or whatever, or just helping a friend. So there's a lot of reasons to go there. So that is one of the things they suggested. There's all kinds of mysteries, and if you go through the table of contents, there's mysteries that can be found. So there's levels by mystery. So depending on what level you're going to adventure at, there's 1 through 16. So that must be the number of exact adventures. It says the table will summarize the anthology. Each adventure is designed for 4 to 6 characters of a particular level, but you can adjust it for larger or smaller groups, adjusting DCs, amount of creatures, that sort of thing, and you can play it pretty much at any level. I'm sure there's some sort of cutoff or some realities in there, but it makes it so that these short adventures are best played with players who like mysteries and discovering secrets. And that said, each adventure contains opportunities for exploration, roleplay, and combat, so it should appeal to most players. So that's a really cool assurance there. Also, when you run the adventure in Fantasy Grounds, there's a little text box that you can read aloud. So if you click on this, you'll be able to either have you or your players read aloud or paraphrase it. You don't have to send it to the chat. When you're playing at a table, you're going to do that vocally. But in Fantasy Grounds, Virtual Tabletop, sometimes you have dialogue boxes that you can send over to the actual chat, which is really cool. It just kind of goes into different things. There's also something that covers out-of-game conversation, limiting topics, being careful of, stressing people out and stuff. So that's more of an opinion and also more of a social adjustment that the role-playing community has been involved with for the last couple of years. So if you notice, there's been an agenda to kind of keep some of the negative, derogatory, sexual, and racial aspects out of D&D, such as slavery and kidnapping and that sort of thing, because that a lot of people in this day and age don't care for that kind of thing. So that's kind of what this is covering in a sense. So you can dissect the adventures, and when you do that, they're basically pieces, or you can use the whole thing. This depends on what your needs are. Nothing in these adventures is too sacred to tamper with, or you can repurpose them to serve your own needs. So that's kind of the cool thing about this. It's one of the things that I liked about it, because you have a higher replay value. It talks about the Forgotten Realms a little bit, and then there's something called 10 days and Dale Reckoning. So in the Forgotten Realms setting, a week is called a 10-day. So basically, there's 3 10 days in a month. So you have, instead of 4 weeks, you got 3 weeks that contain of 10 days. So there's a calendar of Harptos, which is in the DM's guide, or you can find copies of it on the internet. And Dale Reckoning is the most common reckoning, or the recognition of time and months and dates and such, like our Gregorian calendar type thing. The adventures in Candlekeep are presumed to take place in or around 1492 DR, but the exact date is not as important as having fun and incorporating it. So you can plug these in almost any time frame within your campaign. So there's no impact on the canon as far as timeline goes, but it's basically right in par with a lot of the other newer content. So that's basically the opening parts of this for the story. And I'm not going to blow away or spoil any of those, so I'm just going to go and take a look at the content. But you have some artwork here, like here's the Amber Dunes books, the All-Seeing Orb art cover. Oh, here's the alternate art cover. So if you actually purchase the more expensive cover, there's a copy of the picture of it, what it looks like. I think that's pretty cool, but honestly, for the price, I would rather buy two of the same book than just have this one cover. It does look nice. I'm sure it's produced a little bit more higher quality, but I actually like the cover of Candlekeep because it looks more like a module or a D&D cover. This more looks like a showpiece, collectible. So that's kind of the difference. So I might buy one of each if I was going to collect, and not open this very often. And so I have a picture of the cover here, and I think it looks pretty good as it is. But that's just my opinion. So there's some other artwork in here. There's a picture, like an above picture of like a top-down view. There's some other artwork in here. I don't want to show you all the artwork because I think that spoils the fun for some of you. So just giving you a rough idea of what type of artwork is in here. And then I'll show you one map. So if you go to the images and you look at the group, right now I'm in the artwork D&D Candlekeep Mysteries. So if I drop this down and I go to, let's see, D&D, let's see, I got other books here, so I have to make sure. Okay, so here's player maps. So here's like Candlekeep, which is really cool. This is something you can share with your player. Even though it has pins on it, it's not going to reveal those pins to your players unless you decide that you want to right click on it and share it. You can make it shareable, but these are for you basically. They'll see the photo, but as far as the map goes, you'll have the pins to kind of direct you to what each one of these areas, what it belongs to. So if I go to layers, or excuse me, if I go to view and I go zoom to fill, it'll actually fill up this whole screen. And if I zoom in and you click on these links, it takes you to some stat blocks, some information, maybe even encounters. And then there's the inner ward, which talks about, you know, what different places are available. There's the Court of Air. So it just kind of gives you some basic ideas of what's here. There's the Hearse, the House of Rest. If you guys ever played in the original Baldur's Gate, especially the older adventure modules, but they were digital video games, some of these places will look fairly familiar with you. You'll notice that, you know, when you were starting off in that adventure, you went around to each one of these buildings and did little quests to build yourself up closer to first level, that sort of thing. And then you have the gate. Here's the gatehouse. And I remember in the video game, there was a drunk or maybe a sobering soldier, and you had to go find a sword for him. So there's, you know, just little things like that. You can even incorporate some of those old quests that came from Baldur's Gate. So you might be inspired because this touches on some of those nostalgic times when we were playing the video game. So there has some appeal to it there. The other appeal is that, you know, it's made by the community, not just the publishers. But when you actually get into the maps, and, you know, let's take one of these, for instance, and expand this out. There are already grids put on here. All the pins are here that go to the corresponding sections of the adventure. There's the graveyard. And if you right click on here or unlock this as the game master, you can turn off the line of sight mode, or you can turn it on, which is why it's dark, because I don't have any characters right now. But if you have an NPC or character, it'll show the line of sight. If you go to the line of sight area, as you can see, all the line of sight's already been built in, and it's already done for you. There's all kinds of cool little tidbits, and this will help you also if you decide that you want to do your own line of sight. This might give you a guideline. And as you can see, the line of sight doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, honestly, this line, if it was me, it would have drove me nuts because I'm really OCD. but you don't have to have it perfect. You can see how they've kind of just snapped this in here. If it was me, though, and I was building this map, I would probably go nuts. I'd have to have it a little bit more centralized, or a little bit more, even. So that's just me being crazy. But anyhow, if you go to the line of sight mode and you go to the actual wall mode, and then you go to select, you can move these. So if I was going to change anything, I would probably move those a little bit, but that's just me. I mean, that's getting a little bit overboard. And then this corner, I'd probably have it up here a little bit more. So it's just a matter of taste and preference, but all in all, for all practices and purposes, these will work even if they're off a little bit. They don't have to be perfect. Perfection creates hours and hours of work, whereas just getting this stuff available to play is the most important thing. So if you're going to do line of sight, don't get too wrapped up in how perfect it needs to be. So this is something that I would go crazy over, because I'm just like that. But you can see, like, this corner isn't quite as fancy as maybe you want it to be, so I might adjust it a little bit to accommodate for that. But you're trying to keep the number of points down. One of the things that Doug had warned me about was having too many points on your map. So if you have too many places where there's these little points, it's hard on Fantasy Grounds and hard on your computer and your players. So you want to use the least amount of points as possible on the map so that it doesn't bog down your system, because it's constantly taking these points and recalculating them. So if you have too many on your map, that might be a thing. So you got to be careful with how many points you put on there. Some places you can't get away from it, like these corners and rounded parts. You have to have more points. There's not really much you can do. And you can see they didn't get too crazy here. They left it so, like, you have a staircase that you have to open the door and go up into. So that's just getting the occluders correct is not as critical as learning the rules and learning how to move on the map and that sort of thing. So just kind of give you a heads up that the line of sight is already put in. No, it's not going to be 100% perfect, but yes, it's going to work. So just keep that in mind. I'm a little bit discouraged from a personal standpoint. I was hoping to get some colored maps, but those things will work in a pinch. If you don't like the maps, or if you can find substitute maps, I'm sure those will start popping up anytime now. So that this map of Candlekeep, like I was saying yesterday in my video, I have another map that's even greater than this one as far as overall appearance. It looks similar to this, but it's a lot more colorful, a lot more high definition. It seems like these, like Mike Schley type maps, are a little bit blurry or fuzzy, and that's because of the content that they gave us. So there's really no choice on that. But you can substitute with your own maps if you don't like some of the ones they're given. So here's the, for instance, here's the map that comes with another part called the Player's Burnt Tongue. If I unlock this and I go into it, I'm going to turn off the line of sight for temporarily. You could take and color these areas with your paint tools. So if you want to, you can put a mask on here and then paint out this area, like maybe gray or brown. And then in these areas, like the dungeon, you can probably put colored tiles in here. So you can use this as an overlay. So if you select the player map itself, and then you go into the properties of it, like say this is the layer mode. If you have this selected and you unlock it, you can actually go in here and change the transparency of it. So you can tone this down and put it over the top or on the bottom, and then build your map on top of that. And you can also recolor rooms and stuff. So Fantasy Grounds has a lot of capability. You just have to play with it and get used to it and learn what it can do. So these are some things you can do with these black and white maps. You can add tiles on top. So if you had a tile that you wanted to put in here and you have the assets in your library, so if you own the art subscription or maybe you have your own, you would go into your images group and then search for like dungeon tiles. I don't want to search right now because I have so much content that it's going to take 2 minutes for it to go through it all. But if you find your Fantasy Grounds packs and you look for the tiles, or if you purchase a tile set, you can lay those in these squares and kind of build your own map on top of this. So there's a lot of flexibility here that can be done with images. That's just depending on your taste and how much time you have. So I'm going to take a quick peek at the map here, or at the chat. I don't see anybody, so that's good. I'll go back to the review. So those are the images and maps that come with it. And then you have tables. So the tables would probably give you some random results or some story entries. There's just like a couple dozen here at the most. So there's some effects that comes from Mycelium. So if you roll this, it'll give you the output in the chat as to what it does. And then if you need to, you can drag and drop this into a story entry or repeat it or whatever you want to do. So this is set to come out as a chat, but if you do it as a story entry and you roll, it'll pop up a new story entry, and you can include that into your content if you're going to use it. So you could do it a chat in this case because it's just text mostly, or you can do it in a story output. Most likely, though, you want it in chat, and then you can hide the results. So if you hold down, click on the visual aspect of this, and you roll, the result will not show to your players, it'll only show to you. So you can change the output of those fairly simply. Okay, so here in the tables, there are different things that you can do to augment or make things random and have some fun with it. So that is basically what you're getting. And if I go to the library and I scroll down here, I have a lot of the core books loaded. Again, I have encounters in Candlekeep from the DM's Guild. I have Mordenkainen's Candlekeep collectibles. I do have a module from, it was put out probably about 8 months ago, Heroes of Baldur's Gate, in case people come from that area. It gives them some more player options. And then I have the module itself loaded here. So here's the adventure, Candlekeep Mysteries. It comes with a reference manual. So if you click on the reference manual, this is the actual book. So if you're looking for the equivalent of the actual book, the hardback, this is the reference. So if you click on the preface, and then down below you have a next page, you can go through these pages and flip through it just like you would a regular book. And the nice thing is you have these shortcuts you can click on, kind of like you would in a PDF. And then you just have all the tables and stuff. So this reference sheet was basically what I was reading earlier. So if I go to the story tab, you have this reference view, and then you have the Fantasy Grounds view, which is the same thing, but it looks different. So it's presented a little differently. So if it's something that you are wondering about, they're the same information. It's just that this one is embedded into a reference manual, which you cannot alter. This is the copyrighted part and the part that's basically your book. The modular view is more for Fantasy Grounds. You can update this, you can link it, you can do all kinds of stuff. So having the legible book is good, so you can read this on your laptop or something, whereas this is more for like the playing and linking and using as an adventure module within the virtual tabletop. So if you're going to run this face-to-face as just somebody that's going to use their laptop as their tool, you can run this straight out of this book here and just use the handouts, like print some maps or whatever, or maybe even set up a miniatures thing, and you can run this whole basically adventure right out of the reference manual. So you don't have to even use most or half the automation. You can just run this as a reference book and not use any of the tools if you want. But I like the idea of keeping track of combat and having things linked together and being able to present the photos and that sort of thing. You can also have other players connect to it just so they can see what's going on. Give them a player view, and then you run the game master view at your home or your local establishment once those open back up. So basically, there's a reference manual, and you have these pages that you can page through. And if you wanted to look up something, you have this search bar on the bottom left. So it's really handy. So if I wanted to look up potion, I'd type potion down here, hit enter, and then anytime potion is mentioned, it will, here's some potions here, and that brings up the parcel. So it's really cool that how this is linked and put together. And then of course the artwork is embedded in most cases into the module. So like this thing here is embedded. Whereas if I go to the same spot in the Fantasy Grounds part, it'll be a link that actually goes to this picture. So this photo is basically a link that's linked to the adventure, the Fantasy Grounds part. But when you have the reference manual, it's embedded in the page just like a book would be, or very close. So that's your reference manual, and that's true of any content that comes from Fantasy Grounds. The official stuff is like that. So I think in terms of using the content and bringing it to life, it's nice to have some of this extra stuff. As you can see, yesterday I did a little show about that. And here's a nostalgic map of the Baldur's Gate video game. Here are some books to represent that this place is a big library. This symbol over here comes from the main map that was put out on the DM's Guild. It's like basically a very colorful view. I'll show that in a second. This logo up here, I bought this off the DM's Guild. It's a couple bucks. You can use that for personal use and put it in your content to make things more interesting. This is artwork from the actual book, and I think this is too. So when you're making content, just be aware that you have to be careful with copyrighted stuff. But this stuff, I'm not going to share it. It's just part of my game, so I'm using it for demonstration only. The assets that I collected that are part of this particular vein of adventure for Candlekeep, I have made my own group. So for instance, in images and maps, right now I am in the group for the module itself for Candlekeep Mysteries. But if I scroll through here, I have my own group, and this is all my own artwork that I collected. So if I wanted to, like, let's say, here's the picture of the library that I used. So this is just the breakout or the actual image that I used in this overall view. So I might use that for a handout. Here's the picture of Candlekeep that I use. It's in the background. And then if you look at this, here's a symbol that I got from the DM's Guild. So I might use that not only as a photo, but you can use it as a token as well. So if you wanted this to represent your party, you can make like a token that's an NPC and move it around the world map, or maybe you'd move it around the area maps. Use that as a way to keep track of where they're at. There's all kinds of cool stuff. And here's a really high end. This is the map that I found. It's just beautiful. So this is a remake or someone else's interpretation. Like I said, here's that symbol that I used over here. There's some rain that I put on the map to kind of signify that it's rainy out, because it seems like in the original adventure it rained quite a bit on the coast. And I live in Seattle, or in the Seattle area, so I'm very familiar with this. Also, it has a cross section of the dungeons that are involved with Candlekeep. It has a little bit of a index over here on the right to indicate what's what. And then, of course, the beautiful artwork and the scale. So each one of these is basically 50 feet. So this waterfall here that comes out of this building, or this castle looking structure, which is probably the library itself, is basically about 50 feet wide. So this gives an idea of the scale. And then there's like an arrow pointing to the Sword Coast and Way of the Lion. So some of these things are going to be familiar to you if you played the video game or if you have looked through the content already. So this is just a map that I got third party on the DM's Guild. So you can substitute, mix and match, do whatever you want. Here's a guest room that someone designed. There's a map pack for Candlekeep. I think these are a lot nicer. So if you want to substitute some of the black and white ones, you can, if it's applicable. So this is basically this is a guest room in the castle somewhere. and you can use this, like maybe there's a murder or maybe an inside attack or an assassination attempt. Maybe you can use this in your game. And you can see they put the seagulls outside, some of the scenery. So this is pretty nice maps. They're not bad at all. It's CK Maps. He has a CZ Map. Excuse me. He has a store on the DM's Guild where he sells content. A lot of it is like artwork and maps, so it's pretty cool. So here's like a cliffside thing. So if you had an adventure that took you on the cliffside, there's a colored map you can use, and there's even a trail that goes down. There's even a little dock and a boat. So it's pretty cool to have this extra stuff if you're going to adventure in and around Candlekeep itself. So you have a lot of options out there. So you're not just stuck with the module. You have other things that you can bring in. So that's basically what I have for today's show. If there's no questions or comments, that's fine. I will put this up. I'll put a link to the module and some of the content that I have here. And I'd wish you all a very good week. And I hope that you all get to check out this Candlekeep Mysteries within the next month or so. And just remember that Fantasy Grounds is a tool. It's not your end all, give all. You can use it in any way you like. We do post suggestions and such, but it's mainly just for the good of the community, not because we think we know everything, because we don't. The next topics that I want to cover is probably maybe I'll look at a couple chapters and pick one or two of my favorite adventures in there, and maybe even run one of them just to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like and how it can be done. Similarly to the DM series, DM 101, where I run through the first part of Lost Mine and Fendover. I might do something like that. But other than that, I think that's all I have. Just as a heads up, this Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern or 5 p.m. Pacific, Digital Dave is going to have Carl Pinder on. And Carl Pinder is the one that designed the line of sight and the basically all of the occluders and such. So if you want to watch that, I behoove you to watch that, because that's basically the guy that did the work. I think they're getting ready to release it, and they're prepping us for that. So I advise that you watch that show, or at least the video on demand on Twitch. Their Twitch channel is basically twitch.com/fantasygrounds. And they'll have a show on there on Friday night. And they're going to talk about the new ambient lighting and the new features that's going to come with the dynamic lighting. So if you're excited for that, I advise you to watch the show. I've already made announcements. So that's important. They've also made announcements on Facebook. So if you are somebody that's so excited about it, then I would advise you watch the show and make sure that you get a good idea of what they're putting out. They've done other shows regarding, dynamic lighting and such, but this is the one you really want to watch. And I imagine, this is just a guess. This isn't anything that's, in stone. I imagine they want it out by the end of this month. I'm not saying that's when it's going to happen, but that's definitely something I think they're targeting. So anyhow, without knowing anything, that's my guess. And also just to remind you that the Mysteries of Candlekeep is out, or Candlekeep Mysteries. So if you are inclined to run that adventure, it's available on Fantasy Grounds, D&D Beyond, Roll20, all those different platforms. So